welcome to Literary Prospects, where we talk to authors and literary professionals about books, publishing, and the writing life. I'm Kelly Vick. I'm the host of the program, and in just a moment, it will be my pleasure to introduce today's guest. But first, a reminder that if you like what you hear, please do take a moment to subscribe. It helps us out, and you can make sure you never miss an episode. Also, we've opened a Literary Prospects shop, so if you're looking for bookish shirts, totes, and gifts, please check that out at literaryprospects.etsy.com. And to grab books featured on the podcast and check out more curated book lists, you can visit the Literary Prospects bookstore on bookshop.org. And last, but certainly not least, if you're interested in extra content on querying and publishing that's only for our members, please consider joining the Literary Prospects Patreon at patreon.com/literary prospects. We'll leave all those links below in the show notes. And now, let's introduce today's guest. Holly Kennedy is the author of 4 novels, which have been translated into multiple languages. Her latest novel, The Sideways Life of Denny Voss, is out now. When she's not writing, you'll typically find Holly reading, spending time with family, or, her not-so-secret obsession, watching true crime shows. Born and raised in Canada, Holly currently lives near the Rocky Mountains in Alberta with her family and their Newfoundland dog, Wallace. Holly Kennedy, thank you so much for being here today to talk about your enthralling new novel, The Sideways Life of Denny Voss. Author Jacqueline Michard says The Sideways Life of Denny Voss will be a modern classic. Kennedy's Denny is not idealized. Instead, he is fully revealed. His story is a meditation on justice, bigotry, gun violence, and equity. Read it, then look deep into your own community and into your own heart. Author Leslie Kagan says, beautifully written, authentic characters that will tug at your heart, and the kind of story that will keep you turning the pages long after lights out. It's the best novel I've read in a very long time. An author and PhD in disability studies, Patricia Wood, says, I can't rave enough about this novel. The Sideways Life of Denny Voss is simply magical, a heart-wrenching, unconventional tale that moved me from laughter to tears. Denny is a true original, an authentically portrayed protagonist who leaps off the page. His story is irresistible. So with that, Holly, what can you tell us about The Sideways Life of Denny Voss? How do you describe it?
I have a lot of people ask me that, and now that it's gotten out there, and there've been a lot of advanced readers as well. There are individuals saying, "Oh, it's a mystery, or it's a family drama." And I always, in my podcast and in my Q&As and in all my discussions to date, I'm trying to get people to understand it's a cross-genre novel, plain and period. It is not a murder mystery, although it has that element in it. It is a coming-of-age tale, and it has a family drama mixed in. And that was a choice at the very beginning of the structuring of the book. I wanted to make sure that I gave readers a really unique reading experience. So something that would have a lot of talking points, and it does, certainly does. And something that would linger with you, and perhaps maybe not, well, do one of two things: have readers recommend it. And you've heard of big mouth books. So books that are, when people say to you, well, what book can you recommend? Denny Voss. You have to read The Sideways Life of Denny Voss. That's what I want. I want word of mouth build on the book, of course. But I also want readers to go back and maybe read it a year later, because it's a fast read and it's quite propulsive when you get into it. And especially at the back end when you hit the court scenes. I won't give anything away. It does move really quickly. And actually going through those court scenes, I was trying to strike a balance between, there's a lot of threads coming together there, but there are also, for me, sending the reader messages. I wanted them to get to the end of the book. And I have had people say this, saying, I finished the book and I had a good cry and I had no idea why I was crying. And that's good, because I want them to go back in their mind and think, what upset you? What didn't upset you? What made you think about your own life? I think there's just so many talking points in that book that it's, and I'm not knocking genre fiction in any way to write a cozy mystery or to write a thriller or to write a romance. My brain doesn't work that way. I'm ADHD and I struggle really staying on point. You'll find that during this interview of ours, I'll go off on a segue here and attack there, and I'll think, what did she ask me, and try to pull it all
I
back
love
together.
segues.
But I wanted the book to have that kind of a feel to it. So a cross genre book with all of these elements. I knew I wanted it to be something somewhat tender and unique.
Mhm.
And those were the, I guess, the brain things that I came up with using my brain. Following my heart, though, Denny came to me years ago, years and years ago. Back in 2010, I was at a writers' conference, and actually, I think it was in Karen Joy Fowler's class, and we
Mhm.
were doing some kind of an exercise. And we were supposed to come back the next day and read 10, 20 pages to the class. And I don't know, I don't drink, I don't do drugs, but when you're around like-minded people like that, I think it really heightens your creativity.
Yeah.
And you're at a resort, you're with all these people that are striving for the same thing you are, and they are lovely and they have great stories, but it really does pull out the best in your creativity. And Denny just came to me, and I wrote the probably the first 10 pages of the book then in 2010, and it never changed. Today, as it's
Wow.
published, they're the same. So the entry into the book is immediately unseen. And I wanted that. I wanted to pull readers in right away and have them say, literally have them say, what is going on here? And have
Hmm.
to piece together all the threads as they're thrown down. And there's a lot of little Easter eggs that are planted in the book, and then they're relevant later and they pop up later. And if you're a reader who is paying attention and not skimming, then you're going to go, oh, and I see that, and oh, I didn't see that coming. But I knew I wanted it to be a novel that hopefully would have a longer shelf life than a genre novel, like writing, a
Hmm.
mystery or whatever.
Hmm.
So when I wrote it, I picked four elements in the book that were really key to the story to kind of hold it up. And my
Hmm.
agent and I worked together for 8 or 9 months revamping the book. And it had been revamped many times before she got it. And my agent's Liza Dawson. I've been with her for 23 years, and she's wonderful. She really is great. She's an ex-editor as well. So
Oh, wow.
it's, she's not, yeah. So she used to be an executive editor. I can't remember where, but it doesn't matter. She's brilliant.
Mm.
And you can never give Liza something and have her go, yes, this is great. Let's take it out. Never. So she read it, and I mean, it did need work. Absolutely. I see that now. And everything we went through, I'm so grateful we went through the revision that we did on the book. But I remember her getting the initial book, and she had turned down two of my other books prior to that. And I was so devastated when she turned them down, and rightfully so. I've loaded them recently and went, what was I thinking? Oh my God. But I wasn't at my best. I really wasn't. I had stepped away for a while for personal family reasons and just did not have the bandwidth not to have a creative ounce in me at the end of every day. And now that my kids are grown and things are settled, I'm trying to, get back into things. And
Mhm.
I wrote the opening to Denny Voss. I think it was 100 pages and a rough first draft. And I sent it to Liza, the first 50 pages. And I hadn't talked to her in a long time. And I said, hey, here's the opening to a really unique book. It's very different.
Mm.
My other books are all third person point of view.
Mhm.
And I've never written in first. This is the first
Oh,
time ever
wow.
I've written anything in first person. So I sent it to her, and then I forgot about it. I thought, oh, I'll give her a week and see what she thinks. But she's probably, and I was ready. She's probably not going to like it because she's so tough on me. And wow, I might even have to go look for a new agent. Um, and I don't want to do that. So, and Liza and I get along so well, but I headed into the city, and I was actually in a bookstore, and my phone started blowing up. And it was Liza, and she was so sweet. I picked up the phone and she goes, I'm absolutely hooked. This is Holly's voice. This is the voice I signed you on years ago. This is the book that and I'm like, whoa, this is really good. So she said, send me the book. And I did. And of course, she got back and said, your denouement is a little bit all over the place. And you've got a bit of that mushy middle that we all get when we're
Mm.
writing, a
Mhm.
story. And she likened, getting back to the point, because there's a long segue that I just took, right? She likened the rebuild of it to building a dock and having the piles in place at equal
Mm.
points to keep the reader interested. And I'm very much
Mm.
a person who writes from her heart, and I usually just slam it down and trust my instincts.
Uh-huh.
And when I'm Denny on the page, I'm going all over the place, right? And doing some
Mhm.
really weird stuff. And I'm laughing and looking around my office going, is anybody ever going to read this shit and like it? Like when I say shit, I mean this, like this craziness, right?
Uh-huh.
And Liza said, no, no, keep going, keep going. And we put there's four things that happen in the book that kind of shock readers, and I won't go through them, but I spread them out and then had to build around that. We were talking about when the book sold. if an editor wanted to pull one of those threads out. Like the guns were upsetting to some publishers, and they didn't really like the idea of, they weren't comfortable with the climate the way it is and today's world. There were a few issues with the book, the cultural appropriation if you will, of me writing as a man, one.
Mm.
But I don't, I've never written a first person ever, and Holly has to write as a man who's cognitively challenged, who's been arrested for murder. Why not? Let's just try something, really unique. So, taking all that on and the guns, we were having some publishers come back with the nicest rejections saying, I absolutely love this book, but I'm not sure how the market's going to react to those guns.
Mhm.
It's got some really touchy issues. And then along came Alicia Clancy, and she just fell in love with it. And she saw what we saw and the magic and the story. And we all said it's a cross genre book. It is a definitely a book club fiction book. And it
Mm.
gives people a lot to think about. And it's quite film driven as well.
Mhm.
So everybody got
Mhm.
on board and we made all those changes. And some of the last minute changes right before production were very interesting. And I'll tell you one quick story and then I'll shut up
Please
because I
go
take up
for
all
it.
this time.
I love
But
it.
my editor, they went outside and hired an editor to work with me who I adored, Jody Warshaw, and she's lovely. And we were going through the book, and she came to me and she said, Holly, at the very I don't think this ruins anything for the reader. At the very end, when Denny and Lydia come together, and I can tell this, Lydia's thrown in jail,
Mm.
you just move on with the story. Could you bring us together in scene with the two of them in the jail the first night she goes to jail? Because Denny's already in jail as well.
Mhm.
And I backed away from it and I went, no, no, I'm not comfortable with that. Because how do you do that with
Mhm.
that issue and what Denny's been through? And I just thought that's
Mhm.
going to be so touchy. And what if I handle it poorly? And what if I don't do it well? So long story short, I went in, and it takes me a while to get into Denny's head, by the way. So I'll be writing. It'll take 2 or 3 days to finally find the cadence and the rhythm and the way he thinks.
Mhm.
And um, I went into that scene and I put Lydia in the jail cell across from him. And I wrote it so fast. And it's only like, I think 2 pages, 2.5 pages long. And I love that scene. Absolutely love that scene because it shows to me, and it is a little bit the front end of the denouement of the book.
Mhm.
It shows a little bit of growth on Denny's part. And it shows us too a little bit more about who he is as a man because Denny Voss is kind of this enigma and he's
Mhm.
frustrating and people, struggle to get information out of him and that sort of thing. But at the very end of the book, there is one scene where Denny says, I tried to make my heart go hard, but it stayed soft. And that is Denny. And in essence, everything that he is. And another reader sent me a note saying, what I love about Denny Voss is everything he does, he leads with kindness. Everything he does. Doesn't matter what he's going through and the horrors are happening to him. So getting back to Lydia and him in the jail cell, when she says, thank you, and she warms up a little bit in that scene,
Mhm.
it allows us to see a little tiny crack in her cement. And that's the only crack you see in her cement. And I had readers
Mhm.
so far write me saying, I hate Lydia. And I go, do you? I love her. I think she's unapologetically Lydia and she's been through a lot and she has the right to be that. You don't want to write it. I didn't want to write a Disney book. I mean, I need characters
Right.
that feel real. But it was showing readers, I think her and Denny maybe have some kind of future. I don't know what it'll
Yes.
be, but they'll figure it out. So
Yeah.
now, did I answer your question? I
Yes.
went all over the place, right?
But I have more.
Oh, good. Ask
Answered
away.
lots of my questions, but I have more. Well, I'm interested in Denny's voice, which you've mentioned
Mhm.
a couple of times here. The fact that he's a man who is cognitively challenged. You were
Yeah.
worried about writing in that first person from his point of view. And you also just mentioned that it takes you 2 or 3 days to get into his voice. And so I
Yeah.
wanted to hear a little bit more about how that works, how you found that voice, or how you find it each time you're starting to write, and how you got comfortable with it.
Okay. Well, when it comes to Denny, again, back in 2010, he just came to me in this little thing that I was working on for a class. And I
Hmm.
remember laughing about it. And for me, I have learned, I'm getting old, but I have learned in the last 10 years that humor is my go-to. So
Hmm.
if I'm uncomfortable or if I'm in a situation where I feel closed in and I have very high anxiety, like crippling anxiety some days and really bad ADHD, so my mind's bouncing all over.
Mm.
Um, And when it comes to Denny and I wrote that scene, I thought, well, I wonder if I could change this into a woman. And then I was talking, but I really liked Denny and I really wanted to write it from his perspective. And Patricia Wood, who has her PhD in disability studies, was
Mhm.
wonderful as a resource for me. She loved the opening to the book and always pushed me, you got to write this book, you have to write this book, you have to write this book. And it frustrated me, and we can be very honest with each other. And I snipped at her and said, leave me alone. I cannot write this book right now. I do not have the chops to do it. And I didn't. And I knew that.
Mhm.
And I read voraciously. And every time I read buzz books, I read all kinds of books. But every time I open a book, I think to myself, what is this author going to teach me? And what can I learn from this author? And
Mhm.
I'm horrible. I write in the margins, I fold the pages, I make notes and go, brilliant, she did this so well, or he did this well. And I think over the last 10 or 15 years, I've been quietly growing my skill set as a writer. So I'm a
Mhm.
stronger writer today, I can say factually, than I was when I wrote my first three books. And you see growth in any author when you read their backlist. And
Mhm.
I'm not ashamed of them, they're great books. But I'm also at the age where I just don't care anymore. I think I was self-conscious with the first three and really careful about, oh my goodness, what are people going to think? I just don't care. I don't. I'm going to write a good story. And for me, it's always story first. So if
Mhm.
I can find a really good opening and a character that I love, I'm going to follow that. And Pat told me, going back to Pat,
Mhm.
that in her understanding and her cognitive disability studies, this sounds horrible, but it's factual, that in the percentage of men and women cognitively challenged women are not looked at as cuddly, huggable, sweet. They're more annoying. They have a high sex drive. They approach people too quickly. They stand too close. They don't learn the subtleties of how to back away from people as easily. Whereas men, when you think of Forrest Gump or
Mhm.
any man like that, there is something about them that society embraces and they feel like they should protect
Mhm.
them, which is really odd because
Mhm.
you would think you would get that from women. So, and she's,
Mhm.
I don't know how long it took her to get her PhD, much longer than I would ever invest myself. So I love talking to Pat about that stuff. And I just decided one day, no, it's going to be Denny. It has to be Denny. He's the one. And I would wake up at night and write notes, literally at this, and be laughing. And my husband would say, really? Seriously? Like it's 3 in the morning?
Mhm.
And I know lots of writers who do that, but it was Denny. And even writing the book and doing the revisions, I'd be snort laughing, going, oh my God, can I put that in there? Can I say that? What the hell? I'm going to do it because it's Denny. I'm just going to go throw it all down, and my agent and I and my editor can work on any changes. There were the changes we made were more structural and adding the odd scene and kind of sanding off the rough edges of certain scenes, but there wasn't a lot that got moved or changed. Nobody wanted to pull any threads out and say, let's get rid of the guns. Because, I mean, you get rid of the guns, the book's gone.
Yeah.
Because everything about what Denny does is the guns. And there
Mhm.
were things like I had the guns in separate chapters
Mhm.
initially. So when you're reading the book, it was a bit jarring. You'd be reading a chapter, and
Mhm.
then boom, there'd be a short chapter on this gun incident that Denny had seen. And I
Mhm.
found it jarring. And I forget who, I think it was both my agent and editor who said, can we soften that? So I decided, thinking about day-to-day life, and I don't live in the US, I live in Canada, but when you're barreling through life and you have a busy day at work and you get home and you're making dinner and your best friend and her husband are coming and you're pouring wine and you turn on the fireplace and everybody's great and you turn on TV and there's been a mass shooting and 16 kids were killed and it literally guts me every time.
Mhm.
And I know it affects everybody. Like your day essentially slams to a stop.
Yeah.
Whatever you're doing, whatever like life slams to a stop because you're in this, you step into this puddle of horrific
Mhm.
pain and senseless death. And
Mhm.
anyway, someone said, oh, that's what they found difficult when they read the book is they'd be reading along and then boom, there'd be, a gun thing and it would upset them. And I said, good. I hope it upsets you.
Mhm.
I want it to upset the reader. It upsets me and it upsets Denny. And so much of the stuff that I did with Denny mirrored me. And I'll tell you a very quick story to kind of sort Denny out because people kept pushing me in the last couple of podcasts saying, how did you find his voice?
Mhm.
I think I am Denny, which is really funny, but there are elements of my personality that are definitely Denny. I was at a friend's cabin, sitting around a fire, having a glass of wine with my husband, her and her husband. And her husband had read the book 4 times and he loved the book. It was out on submission. And he said, Holly, can I ask you something? Which character do you think you're most like?
Mhm.
And I said, well, I'm Denny. And my friend who's drinking wine spit out her wine literally just it was a reaction. She just spit it everywhere. And my husband sat back and went, "Oh boy." And I looked at her and said, "What's the matter with you?" And she said, "I'm sorry, but you are not Denny. You want to be Denny, but you're Angus. You're so Angus." And then my husband was sitting there laughing, and he said, "No, but I see what you're saying. She has Denny inside of her in the way she thinks, in the
Mhm.
tiny things that, like him being at the border and seeing a little ladybug climb up over someone's shoe.
Mhm.
That's where my mind goes. Or,
Mhm.
a dirty chair in the courtroom that he's just focused on. And I'll lock in on things that are normal everyday things, elements in a room. And when I'm uncomfortable, I'll lock in on them and they'll bother me until I correct. And some of it is OCD too, because if I see the number 23 or 11 or 6, or I mean 5, it has to be an even number or I can't move forward thinking. So if we're in the
Mhm.
car and the heat is on 21, my husband knows after all these 36 years, turn it down to 20 or 22 because it bothers me so much it throws me off. So I took a lot of what my oddities are and built them into Denny. He gets fixated on things, so do I. My mind loops. There are days where I can't write. I can't. I'll try and I'll just loop and loop and loop over one paragraph. And then I self-doubt kicks in and I think, who do you think you are? What are you trying to do here? And it's horrible. It really is a really difficult thing to live with. And then for the next 2 months, I'm fine.
Mhm.
So my husband said she thinks like Denny, she acts like Denny, her mind works like Denny, but she's really Angus. And when you really make her mad, she's Lydia full force. And that's true. I'm very, very Lydia. Like if I were in a courtroom and they were asking those questions, I would answer the way Lydia answered.
Mhm.
So coming up with his voice was unique. And then I literally tested it. I would write a couple chapters and then hand it to good friends. And everybody thinks it's, oh, you're writing a humor novel, a novel with humor.
Mhm.
Yes and no. It has humor in it as an element, but I don't know if you've read it yet or not. By the time you get to the end,
Mhm.
there's a lot more in that book than humor, a
Oh
lot
yeah.
more hidden and layered and multifaceted, if you will. So the voice had to be the key thing for me to get. And there were times where I would write chapters and someone would come back and say, Denny wouldn't say that. And they
Mhm.
started to get to know him and know how, and I went, oh, they're right. Denny wouldn't say that. He'd say this. And a
Mhm.
lot of what he does lead with kindness, and there's a lot of purity there and innocence, but he also rationalizes things in his own way. And
Mhm.
his own little, he's aware of everything around him. Like a good example would be there's a scene in the book where um, Angus is talking about Elaine the stalker, his neighbor, that she keyed
Mhm.
his truck.
Mhm.
And Denny explains for the reader's benefit, keying a truck means when you take, a key and you scratch FU Angus on the side of a truck door. And that's what he understands it to be. But we know otherwise. So there's
Mhm.
many things in the book where Denny understands things a certain way, and that's what he believes to be true.
Mhm.
It's like him saying, I work part-time at Dot, and Angus is my boss, and he works full-time. And Angus says they're so lucky to have me because on the days that he works, there's never any roadkill. On the days I work, there's always lots of roadkill. So
Mhm.
again, the reader knows what's happening there.
Mhm.
And it was really difficult for me to take both his voice and first person and tell a story. And I would sit down and say, in this chapter, I need to accomplish these 6 things. I have Denny's voice, I have Angus's t-shirts, I have scenes and what they're doing, where the setting of it. How do I accomplish all this? And it
Mhm.
was a lot harder than I thought it would be. And yet, the immediacy of it, once I found the rhythm of putting the reader in Denny's head, and I wanted the readers first and foremost to love Denny. And I think so far, touch wood,
Mhm.
everyone that I've heard from, it's really interesting. I'll get a comment back from somebody or a reviewer or a blogger. And one of the first things they say is, first and foremost, before I get into anything, I love Denny Voss. I love Denny Voss. And I get that a lot. It sounds weird, but people really are relating to him. And he's not. You wouldn't think he'd be relatable, but he is, right? On many
Mhm.
levels. I think he touches our core on many levels.
Yes.
So getting his voice down pat was really difficult. And I'm not quite sure how to describe it other than practice and practice and practice. And then I would become Denny and I'd have to slide away for 2 weeks. And my agent would say, we'll get back to it in 2 weeks. And I'd think, shit, because how
Mhm.
am I supposed to, go back to being me and then go back to being Denny? It was
Mhm.
difficult. And
Mhm.
frankly, when I signed the book off into production and did the last look of at the manuscript and the copy edits and everything, and there was such a good team. And the final lady who looked it over was this older lady they hired to do whatever edits on the book. And she wrote me a note saying, I don't say this often, but this book is exquisite. And I cannot wait to get it on my bookshelf. And thank you so much for letting me being part of it. And I thought, oh, that was so nice to hear, you know?
Yes.
So clearly Denny is speaking to people, which is really good. And I
Yes.
love it.
And you've said that you want Denny to challenge stereotypes.
Yeah, I do.
Can you talk about that a little?
Sure. I don't think that everyone does it. I think that our society is getting kinder and more tolerant of change and differences in people, as we should, for heaven's sakes. You
Hmm.
know, if somebody is autistic, or if my son has Tourette syndrome, and so does one of the boys, the little boy in the book
Hmm.
with Denny. We never ever shied away from talking about it. Probably to the point of my son at 26 now would walk in here and do an eye roll and say, "Really, you got to bring it up on a podcast?" Because I can hear him. But we've just said, you know, when he was diagnosed, you have Tourette's. This is what it means. This is what it's going to be. And I went around, not door to door, but I made some phone calls, went to a few doors, and talked to parents of kids who were bullying him because he was twitching and stimming on the bus, and
Mm.
he would take food and he would take a piece of beef jerky. And my husband and I would look at each other. He would go through these stages and he would take a bite and then rub it on this cheek, take a bite, rub it on this cheek, and then he'd eat it. And
Mm.
it's like talking to somebody who has dementia. You don't want to humiliate them or shame them or
Mhm.
correct them. But I would say, honey, do you know that you're doing that? And he'd say, doing what? And I go, rubbing your food on your face. I am not. And and he is, and it's stimming and it
Mhm.
calms him down. And I understand that. I have elements of that in my own personality. So he's doing something that will relax him and calm him down. But he was being bullied. And I went and talked to all the mums and said, this is what's happening. He's been diagnosed with Tourette's. He's mild to moderate, but he will have some bad days.
Mhm.
And if I hear of anyone bullying him, I will be back here on your doorstep and we'll be chatting, because that's just not going to happen with my son. And I
Mhm.
took a really hard stand with it because, as any mother would, you know, you don't
Yeah.
want your child. So to me, tolerance for stuff like that. I love a lot of the British movies that you see in British shows where somebody walks in and they have half an arm, or they have a peg leg, or they're blind in one eye, or whatever. They just are who they are. That is the character. There's no
Mhm.
explanation. It's
Mhm.
not like you're a token character we pulled into this novel or into this film. It's
Mhm.
a character that was essential, and that character does a good job. And whether he, she, them, you know,
Mhm.
whatever, has one leg, two legs, if they can do the job and it's going to move people, great. And I think they're doing it right, because in society these days, there's so many people who are battling being bullied and trying to fit into society and just be accepted. And for heaven's sakes, they just want to have their own quiet life. Who are we to let, you know, step in and judge them or bother them or whatever, right?
Yes. Yes.
So it was important. It was important to me that that Denny challenged those stereotypes. And just quickly to wrap that up, I wanted him to be kind of independent. I wanted
Mhm.
him to have an arc, have a growth arc. And after
Mhm.
Nana Joe sent him out to take care of his own problems on his own, that went well.
Mhm.
But he, you know, going to the border and stuff like that. And I was having so much fun with that, with
Mhm.
having Denny just do whatever Denny wanted to do. But he wasn't scared about it. He was just doing what he had to do. He's somewhat pragmatic, Denny. And
Mhm.
as he was barreling through, I wanted to show that he could be independent and that he could grow. And his role with Nana Joe essentially shifts after at the end, where she used to take care of him, he's taking care of her.
Mhm.
And he's a caregiver, and he's been given a lot of life skills, and he knows how to change the furnace filter and cut the grass and take care of things that, you know, other kids probably wouldn't. So I
Mhm.
did want those stereotypes to be looked at a little differently. If you meet somebody on the street, I just wanted readers to think of Denny Voss and think, maybe this individual's sad or scared or lonely, and it'd be really nice to just say, hi, are you having a good day? You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Yes. Exactly.
Mhm. Yeah.
The novel deals, we've talked about, with some heavy topics, but you say that it was important to you that it not feel dark or depressing. You
Hmm.
wanted readers to see the potential for the world to be better. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, that's an interesting balance with the gun stuff too, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
Because that is a tough issue. And there are some other ones in the book too with yeah. I won't give anything away, but there are some tough issues. I don't think any of us are exempt from those, by the way. We're all barreling through life doing the best we can, and we can paint a smile on and do a podcast and act like everything's fine, and then shut down and run downstairs, and you've got somebody not throwing up with the flu, but dealing with mental health issues or dealing with stress or whatever. And people lose people. This book that I wrote, The Sideways Life of Denny Voss, another segue, Holly, oh my God, is dedicated to my best friend who died of breast cancer, and her daughter who also died of breast cancer. And she was 29, which is just a shame, a real shame. Brenna has been gone a year now after her mother died in 2018. And we were the kind of friends, I won't have a friendship in my lifetime like that again. We would finish each other's sentences. It was one of those friendships where you felt like soulmates. And she was divorced, and she traveled with my husband and I a lot. And we raised our kids together. And she got cancer and died. And she was worried about her kids. And I'm so glad she didn't ever know that Brenna was going to get cancer and die too. But I look at stuff like that and I think life throws you a lot of shit. It does. And it also throws you some really good stuff at the same time. And you can't let the shitty things pull you down because it's so easy to, I mean, there are days where I just want to go curl up in bed and have a sleep and say, screw it all. And I struggle with that a lot. I've struggled with depression a lot over the years. And I wanted a book that allowed readers to see somebody making it through the rough spots. Not only making it through, but perhaps inspiring those that he touched as he went through those things.
Mm-hmm.
People who could look at it and say, wow, I'll probably never be arrested for murder, but if I am, Denny Voss is giving me a great example of how to handle it, beyond
Mm-hmm.
him being difficult to get information out of. But I don't think Denny fully comprehends just how bad things are until the very end, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a tightrope walk because I know a lot of people who were reading the front end saying, "Oh, this is so fun. This is such a
Yeah.
fun." I mean, it's so fun, and it is, but it
Huh.
builds on you. And I think as you get halfway through and things start happening, and you get very attached to the characters, including some of the support characters.
Yeah.
The secondaries, like Angus plays a big role. And I had one podcaster say, I absolutely love Angus. And I went, yay. He's the t-shirt guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when the book went into the first part of copy editing production, I think there were 16 t-shirts in the book. And we had a day where there was 5 or 6 in that crew that were working on something at the publisher that they got so excited and they wanted to have a call with me. And they said, we love these t-shirts. And at the end, we think Angus should hand t-shirts out in the denouement. And I went, you guys need to go home and have some tea and take a deep breath because Angus is not handing out t-shirts at the end of the book. It's just not going to happen. And then they said, but we love the t-shirts. Can we put more? And I said, well, at what point do they become kitschy? Because I use them as Angus comes into a room or a scene. I use those t-shirts to give the reader a signal of how I guess they're all puzzle pieces of how Angus operates. He's
Mm-hmm.
crusty on the outside. Nobody gets near him. Nobody gets close. But if you break Angus down and you get behind those barriers, he's just a big mushball. And when it comes to Denny, like I had one guy say, I hate Angus. He was so mean to Denny. And I thought, was he? There's a scene where he's digging a hole. That's all I'll say. And
Mm-hmm.
Denny says, can I help you? And through that entire scene, he does not speak. Angus speaks a lot. And he's always saying, aim higher, Denny, get a better dream because you shouldn't want to be a Frito-Lay truck driver. What's funny about that is Angus has the same job that he does. And he's telling him to aim higher, and get a better dream.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but Angus is his buddy and he's his touch point. I think he adores Nana Joe, but if something bad goes bad, if things go sideways, he goes for Angus. He finds Angus, and Angus talks him off the ledge every time. And
Mm-hmm.
that first scene where he goes to Angus's house, and I won't say why, he's so upset. And Angus answers the door and he says, this is what happened. And Angus says, yeah, I heard all about it. Come on in.
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't treat it like it's a big deal because it really isn't. I mean, Denny's been alive 30 years without that knowledge. And
Mm-hmm.
I wrote that scene so quickly, as I would write it if I were talking to my own son. And I wasn't Denny in that scene, I was Holly. And I wrote it as though I was talking to one of my sons and that they had found something like that out.
Mhm.
And when he says, I love, and I don't know how this came to me when he said, list five characteristics of her and five of you. And then
Mhm.
he laughs and says, she's athletic. You're the most unathletic guy I've ever met. You can't do this, you can't do that. And he's feeling better about himself, even though he can't do all of these things. He's feeling better that he's not like her.
Mhm.
And by the end, he's settled. And it's like, oh,
Mhm.
Angus explained it in a way that he can understand, accept. And I think it gave Denny a basis to regroup and rethink that relationship so that he can move forward with his life and say, okay, that's what it is. I'll just move forward.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't talk about it very much. He doesn't talk about how he
Mhm.
feels about those things.
Mhm.
He just gets
Mhm.
angry right away.
Mhm.
But yeah, I wanted those tender moments, and I was hoping readers would find them
Yeah.
and that they would surprise them because I love when somebody says to me, "You made me laugh so hard on page 16," and on page 21 I was bawling,
Yeah.
and I said, "There you go. That's it. We need that in life. We
Yes.
need that."
Yeah.
When I can tell it, my old friend Roberta, who passed away, we had the same sense of humor. Hers was a bit raunchier, but we would find I would be standing there and she would nudge me. We were gonna be in a lineup. I took her to New York. She'd never been there. We were touring through, and it's really busy, as you know.
Mhm.
And I forget where we were, and Roberta's constantly nudging me, going, Hall, do you clock that? Do you see? I go, yeah, I'm not even looking at you. Not even looking at you because you're just driving me crazy. So having a friendship like that and somebody that sees the humor in situations that aren't always humorous.
Yeah.
I think it's important because life is just some of the stuff that comes at us, we can't possibly be prepared for. So I
Yeah.
think we need to have the support system around us and a sense of humor at the same time to
Mhm.
manage those surprise situations, right, that pop up.
Mhm.
Because none
Mhm.
of us get through this clean.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody has secrets, and everybody has, a husband who cheats, or a dad who's an alcoholic, or somebody who, a cousin who got caught drunk driving and killed a family. Like there's always these
Mhm.
horrible, terrible things going on. Um, and yet, yeah, I wanted Denny to be able to show the reader maybe there are ways that we can make it even nicer than it is now on the times that are good, right?
Yeah. Yeah. How did you come to writing?
Well, I wasn't going to. I actually I thought someone else should write it. And after I wrote that opening, I showed a few writer friends and said, you should write this. And all
Well,
of that.
originally, but you've written several novels before writing
Yes,
Denny.
yes, I did.
I'm talking about back in the beginning. How did you first come to writing?
Well, come to writing in the very beginning. Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah.
I thought you meant the book. Sorry. Um,
That's fine.
I was raised in a very poor family. We had everything we needed, but we were definitely poor and stuck out when we went to school. We didn't have designer jeans or designer anything. We had hand-me-down clothes from our cousins and that kind of thing.
Mm,
And my mom would be furious for me saying that because she hates that I say that we were poor, but we were.
mm,
And reading became my escape. So I would go to the library, and we had one car. We lived out in the country, and I bought a bicycle and I would bike 13 miles into town to get a job. So I got a job at a hotel cleaning rooms, and then they moved me into their front desk taking registrations with one of those really old fashioned, what do you call them, where you plug into the rooms to get them to speak. You know what I'm saying?
like intercom things?
Hmm,
Or
oh, what's it called, for heaven's sakes? Where you pull out the plugs and you plug that in and it plugs their room in and they can all talk if a call comes in.
oh
What
yeah,
is
like an operator? Like
An
a
operator? Yeah, thank you.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah, they had an operator thing for all the rooms in the
Okay.
hotel. I ran
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
And I didn't have money to go on dates. I didn't have clothes to go on dates. I remember some of the girls that I went to school with who were really nice. I thought they were nice and
Mm,
they were very popular. And I was dating one of the guys in the fringe of their group, and they asked me to go with them to the city. And
mm,
the guys went off to do something. We were going to a concert. And this was a really big deal for me because I've only been to three concerts in my life, even today. That's it. And that was the first one. And the boy I was with was going to pay for my ticket. And my mom and dad gave me, I think, 20 or $30 to pay for food. And we were staying at a friend's sister's house. But all these girls went to the mall and they always had such nice clothes and they came from well-off families, and they did, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And three or four of them broke off with me and said, "Come this way." And I'll keep this as short as I can. We went into like a denim place. They sold jeans,
Mm-hmm.
and they were all trying on jeans. And these are pretty girls, really pretty girls. And the guys running the place are just running in circles around these gorgeous girls who are doing flirting, as Denny would say,
Yeah.
with them, right? And
Uh,
they were taking three or four pairs and blah, blah, blah. And one of them grabbed me and pulled me into a room with her and said, "Try these on, try these on." And I said, "But I don't have money to buy jeans." And she goes, "Just try them on." And I'd never owned a brand new pair of my own jeans. So I
mm,
tried a pair of these jeans on and they looked really nice. And I had a $20 bill for food for dinner. And the jeans were like 19.99. And she said, "You should buy them. You should buy them." But I knew I couldn't because then I wouldn't eat.
mhm,
So I said, "No, no, I can't, but I'll watch you guys get your stuff." And then I came to realize what was happening. She had a great big, huge carry bag with her, and it was empty when we went in, and it was zipped shut. And she unzipped it. And two of the other girls were distracting the guys out front. And here I am naively involved in all of this. And she's
mhm,
rolling up jeans and putting them in the bottom of her bag and then covering them with her jacket. And I
mhm,
remember watching this going, "No, this can't be happening." And I said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "Give me your jeans." And she rolled them up and put them in there. She was very domineering. And I was scared
mhm,
of getting caught with her.
mhm,
And I said, "You can't do this." And she said, I am. We do it all the time." And I said, "What?" She goes, "We do it all the time. Just paste a smile on and we're out of here." And I was trembling. I was such a mess.
mhm,
And we left, and there were three of them. They all had bags. These guys, they gave their numbers to fake numbers, phone numbers to these
mhm.
guys, and we took off. Get out to the car. They're all laughing and pulling stuff out of their bags and showing. And I'm literally opening the back door and throwing up in the parking lot. And they're
Oh,
going, "Oh my God, Holly, are you sick?" And I go, "Yeah, I think I have a bit of a flu." I never hung around with them again. I was so upset. But when I got home, she drove me home and she
mhm,
handed me my new jeans. And she said, "Here, these are yours." And I said, "I don't want them." And she said, "Take them." And my mom's walking out of the house and this is all happening.
mm,
So I grabbed the jeans and threw them in my bag. I didn't do laundry. My mom did the house laundry. She saw them and she said, "Where did you get these jeans?" Because she knows we didn't have the money for that.
mm,
And I said, "Oh, one of the girls bought them for me." And she said, "Oh, okay." And then a couple months later, she said, "You never wear those jeans." And they were really nice jeans. I
mm,
never wore them because they made me feel absolutely sick.
mhm.
Um, but anyway, how did I get on that segue? Oh my God, Kelly. I
You
remember.
were you were talking
Oh,
about
learning
growing
how to
up.
write. So
Yes.
I was thinking from that. My family always says I exaggerate so much, and they're probably right. But that I'm a storyteller, and they're right about that
Mhm,
too. But I don't tell a story in a straight line, which is really unfortunate because I'm always going back and segueing here and there, and that makes it tough for an editor to deal with and me structurally in a story. But I remember I got a job as a long distance operator. It was my first ever job. So funny. Sit in a chair for 8 hours and listen to people and tag off, and it was horrible. But I remember walking to work in Edmonton, Alberta, and I lived there for 10 years. And I walked by the only publisher I knew every morning. And I would go early to stand at their windows and look through the windows at the books in there. And I went in twice, got the courage twice to go in and drop off my resume. And they were dismissive and just like, "Yeah, whatever." You know, I had
mhm,
no idea what was involved. I had no idea what kind of jobs were in there. I just wanted to be part of it. And I would have been, I was I finished high school at 17, so I was 17 years old. And I
mhm,
knew I wanted to be an author. I just didn't know how to do it.
mhm,
And I'm a very, very much a marketing and business person.
mhm,
I ran two large businesses, one in Western Canada and one in Eastern Canada. And and it just came naturally to me to do that. And they were very successful. And I married the man who owned part of the business. So funny. Him and his brothers owned it. We were good friends, and he was divorced, and we ended up getting married. So that's a whole other story. But um, I remember thinking to myself, I'll get a job and I'll pay the bills, but in the meantime, I'll research writing. And I
mhm.
needed to understand the business side of it before I even came near the creative side of it.
Int-
So unfortunately, I understand the business side and its evolution very well, which is intimidating,
mhm,
especially today, because there's so many options out there and some wonderful writers. And the sheer volume of books that come out, I don't know how people read that many. I mean,
mhm.
I'm lucky if I read 30 a year and I read slowly and I really relish it. So I
Yes.
have people, I'm nobody. I just have a book out first time in 17 years. I've had 12 people ask me if I could read their manuscripts. in the last couple of weeks. And I
Wow.
have to say no because I can't. I
Yeah.
don't read that fast. I don't know how to deal with that kind of pressure. I want to help, but
Yeah.
how do I do that?
Yeah.
So being an author though and telling the stories, it wasn't the I'm an author thing that thrilled me. It was I know there's a customer facing element to this job. We're doing some of that today.
Mm-hmm.
But I really like the invisibility of it. And I'm intensely private, even though we're doing this.
Yeah.
Um, and I love the idea of making something, making a story that I can send out into the world and have somebody read it and laugh and cry and be moved by it and say, I love this book. I want to recommend this book. Good, please do. I want to tell so and so to read it and so and so to read it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I just take such pride in self what's the word that I'm looking for? It's such a satisfying feeling to have somebody, of course, praise your work. But
Yeah.
when you can tell the ones that really mean it, that really get it, that
Yeah.
really get any story and get to the end and say, like one girl sent me a note and she said that she cried at a point where it didn't make sense to me. And I can give this away because it's not a big deal. I said, where'd you cry? Because I'd like to know as an author, because
Mm-hmm.
usually I know where they're going to cry at the end,
Mm-hmm.
if they cry or get verklempt or whatever. And
Yeah.
she said, I cried at the Guppy Badge. And I went, what? And she said, where Nori brings the Guppy Badge to Denny in jail and says, yeah, he passed. And she thanks him. And he says, for what? And she says, for being you. And she said, I sobbed. And I went, wow, that wasn't written to make anyone sob. So
Mm-hmm.
people will react to the characters in different ways, in a
Yeah.
book like that. And they'll
Yeah.
have favorites and ones that they don't like. But I wanted to spend the extra time while writing that book to make sure I didn't have cardboard backup characters. I wanted
Yeah.
them all to have lives that were important to them. Elaine is clearly Elaine, which they stopped calling her Elaine the Stalker halfway through the book. But Elaine the Stalker has clearly got her sights set on Angus yet again because they've already been married once, which I
Mhm.
think is so funny. And it kind of has an office feel of Pam and Jim,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
he's just fed up with her, but he's drawn to her. And then at the very end, in that final scene where she says, "Oh, just wait till next year, Denny." There's all these little throwaway things that I just love. And same with like when you talk about a book with diversity and all these different characters, and Denny making friends with a little boy with Tourette syndrome
Hmm.
and teaching him to have confidence more than anything.
Yeah.
And then making friends with a guy who's a war vet and doesn't, loses his leg. Somebody runs off with his leg. Well, that's horrible, but there's humor in that too,
Yeah.
which is a twisted humor. But you think, really? You went to sleep and you woke up and some idiot stole your flipping leg? Like, come on, let's go hunt him down. But I can't get away from it, Kelly, the humor part of it. I just
Yeah.
started another novel last week because Denny's out. And
Hmm.
when I signed him into production, I literally had a good cry because I thought, God, go do what you're going to do. You're out in the world. And yeah, I wrote you, but it's you. I want you to go touch people. And I
Yeah.
really hope you have a great life out there and that your story arc isn't, one up for 6 weeks and then drops down into obscurity. I
Yeah.
really want Denny Voss to have the kind of lifespan with this book that goes,
Yeah.
6, 7, 8, 9 years and hits all over the world and people are referring him and having this quiet build to his life. So he's out of my mind. I started a new book and my husband came up to my office and I said, you are not going to believe it. It's happening again. There's and he said, what do you mean? Because I'm waking up at 2 in the morning. I'm laughing so hard that I was actually usually I text myself a
Uh-huh.
scene and he said that there's better ways to do it, than texting yourself a scene because
I
then you get
text
it twice.
myself.
Do you?
Yeah.
Do you do the same thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God. Well, I'm texting myself this scene and I'm trying to pick a name and I don't like name. I don't when I write for my characters, I don't want a Jane and a Bob and a Frank.
Hmm.
I want names that feel real and that don't feel like they were made up to get attention in the book. And I've
Hmm.
been waiting for the right name. And this is a first person point of view book yet again, which I love. I found that the immediacy of Denny is something I don't want to give up now. It is more challenging, but the third person feels a bit more removed. And I love
Hmm.
my first three books, but I think the future ones will be first. So this is first person. She's 30 years old. And I can say it because the last blog or podcast I did, she asked about it a bit and wanted to know a bit about it. And she
Hmm.
said, well, what happens? And I said, well, I'm not going to talk about the arc of the book.
Mm-hmm.
It will be a cross-genre book, absolutely. It will have coming of age and family drama and mystery, but this one also is going to have romance in it. And it starts, and she's 30 years old, and she is handcuffed to a chair in a hotel in her underwear, and she's been arrested. And I was laughing. My husband goes, "No, you're not going to take them there." I said, "I'm good."
I was like, where are we going with it?
Yeah, but don't you do? I mean, the same thing with Denny. You open Denny and you go,
Mm-hmm.
"What's happening here?" Right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm not. I said, "I don't know how I can do this, Rick, and not sound like Denny, but I don't want her to sound like Denny." But I grew up with weird things happening to me, and my mom did too. So it runs in the family. And I'll slight story. My mom lives in a town called Rochester. There's 70 people in this hamlet, and
Mm-hmm.
it's 4 kilometers off the main highway. You have to go down this twisty little gravel road and then across an empty lot. And there's her house, which was the old post office. And every morning she has tea in her post office room at 7 in the morning. She's sitting there with her tea and she's watching the semi trailer come down around the curves and cuts right across the empty lot in front of her house and hits her, slams into her house, like in the middle of nowhere. And my mom's yelling, going, "Al, Al," to her partner, "There's a truck." And bang, it hits their house. Well, it came in their house, and their house is, I think,
Oh my God.
700 square feet. And she phoned me and she goes, "Oh, I just had a semi truck trailer hit the house." And I said, "Are you serious?" And that stuff like that happens to my mom and to me all the time. And the guy driving it was on PCP. He was 28 years old. He was wearing underwear and rubber boots, and he was higher than a kite. My mom wants to feed him. She wants to bring him in and feed him. And Al's like, her partner's like, "We are not bringing him in. He's not coming in." She goes, "That could be our grandson." And he goes, "But it's not our grandson." So here's my mom at 80 years old putting him in a chair in her yard and bringing him homemade warm cinnamon buns and
Mm.
a jacket and some sweatpants she found him. So there's a quick story there. The one with the start of this book, I said to her, no one will believe it, but I've told people over the years, I was really stressed. I used to work in business and I was responding to a tender, a Canada-wide multi-million-dollar tender. And I was so stressed. And I was also running my branch with 30 employees. And my boss was my brother-in-law. And my husband went to him and said, "Holly's going to burn out." And I'd never been through burnout. "I'm taking her away to this lodge, to Yellowbird Lodge. And we're going to finish the tender there. And I'm going to make sure she goes for a couple paddles and some walks and has a nice dinner." And he goes, "Whatever, as long as she gets the tender done." Because at that point, I was the only person who could answer them in the business, my husband and I.
Mm-hmm.
So we drive up to this beautiful little lodge called Yellowbird Lodge, and we get there, and there's two, like a U shape where there's rooms upstairs, rooms on the bottom, and then a beautiful dining room. And it's considered technically a fishing lodge. So we go up to our room upstairs, and none of the doors lock, none. And I remember saying to my husband, "Yeah, I don't like this." And he goes, "Oh, Holly, it's a fishing lodge." It's like, "Yeah, but I don't care. Like my door doesn't lock."
Mm-hmm.
And back then we had computers, big, those great big monitors. He
Mm.
carried everything upstairs for me. And I got into my sweatpants and I don't drink much. And he brought 2 bottles of wine and he gave me a glass of wine. And I went, "Wow, that wine tastes so good. I'll have more." So I ended up having 4 or 5 glasses of wine and got toasted and get ready to go to bed because when I drink too much, I fall asleep when I do that. So I said to him, "I'm going to go to bed. But before we do, can we put that chair in front of the door? Because I'm really nervous someone's going to break in."
Mm-hmm.
And my husband goes, "No one's going to break in our room, Holly. Like you always do this. You always think something's going to happen." And I go, "I know." And it usually does. So we take this big armchair that was so heavy, we both pushed it up against the door. And then I went to sleep. And I was cute back then. I was young and cute. And I was wearing a little pair of panties and a little t-shirt with no bra. And that was it.
Mm.
And I wake up out of a dead sleep, laying in bed, and there's a man standing over me, naked, in his underwear, not my husband. No, we were fiancés. We were just engaged, with a bat. And he's screaming at me. That's how I woke up. And I literally went in shock. And I've never been in shock before. And I'm like, like I'm processing, where am I? What's going on at a very high rate of speed. And I
Mm-hmm.
wrote a story about this for Jacqueline Michard's class years ago in Maui. And she went, "Publish that." And I said, "It's
Yeah.
going in the book." Well, that's how we're opening this book. So anyway, so I'm laying in bed. And then I look over to the corner and there's another guy, a younger guy in his boxer shorts, and he's holding a lamp and he's screaming and their mouth's moving. it was like a movie. Their mouths are moving, and I can hear in general people screaming, "What are you doing? You're trying to rob us, blah, 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 blah." But I don't have a clue what's going on. So I go to sit up and he pushes me back on the bed, slams me down and says, "Don't move or I'll hit you." And he's, screaming at me and yelling at me, opens the door to the room. Well, it's the door at the end of the U shape. So everybody can open their doors and see that
Hmm.
I'm in a bed half naked up against the headboard. And my fiance sticks his head out our door, looks in and goes, "Unreal," pulls his head back in and disappears. And I was so furious later, but he said I had to get dressed. I was naked. I had to go get my clothes on. And this was a real test. He likes to joke about us being engaged versus fully married because he actually married me after this happened. And I said, "Oh, lucky you." So anyway, I did get arrested. The cops came, the owner of the hotel came, and it was determined that I had moved that chair in the middle of the night and sleptwalked. I had to go to the bathroom, and I went down the same route I would at our house to find a bathroom. Went in this man's room, which had no lock, and climbed into bed with him when I couldn't find the toilet. I opened all the drawers. I'm trying to find a toilet, but I'm sleepwalking.
Yeah.
And he's there with his son on a fishing trip. And I just got frustrated and went, "Screw it." And I climbed into bed with him. So this guy's like, I was probably 26, 27, cute, thin and little panties. And here's this guy that's like 60, beer belly, chicken legs, wearing, boxer shorts. And he's like screaming and yelling at me with a bat that he uses to kill fish when he goes fishing. And then they call the police. And in the meantime, my partner's getting dressed. And the guy who runs the place comes and they did a Google, no, back then not a Google. The cops did a search on my name, and my maiden name was Holt, so I was Holly Holt. And they found a Holly Holt in the States who the IRS was after,
Oh my
and
God.
somebody else was after. So the border is really close to where this lodge was, and they thought I was her, so they arrested me. And this shit happens to me like time. So I'm sitting there at this, so I'm better off being reclusive, right? So I remember sitting in a chair in my underwear in the hallway in handcuffs. And finally, my husband comes along and they're yelling at me saying, "She won't say anything." Well, my whole body was just trembling. And I was in shock. That one lady came out and she checked my pupils and she goes, "She's in shock, for God's sakes. Get her some clothes." And the guy goes, "She has no clothes in her room." And the guy with the bat says, "It's not her room. It's my room." So my husband comes out and he brings sweatpants and covers me up. And then they take the handcuffs and they take me down to this cop place and they do a bunch of searches and find out I'm not Holly Holt from, I don't know, Connecticut or whatever they're looking for. And then we go back to the lodge because I still have this tender to respond to. And if we don't get it, the business probably won't be there. Like it's a big tender and we need this tender. So I go back to do this tender and I'm locked in our room working on it and crying, saying, "I'm absolutely sick that I scared these men." So I
Mhm.
made my husband go get me a card, a sympathy card. And I
Uh-huh.
wrote a note saying, "I have never slept walk in my life, ever. And I don't know what happened, probably stress and close to burnout and wine.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to crawl into bed and scare you. Thank you for not hitting me on the head with your bat. And I apologize." And I went and slid in under their door. And then I ran back to my room. Well, on the last night, Rick said, "I'm sure they're gone. Let's go down and have dinner. You've been here 5 days and we haven't had dinner out of the room." So I go down to the their dining room area and I'm sitting at the table and I see these two men get up and I was in such shock I forgot what they look like. Like it just was blacked out on me.
Uh-huh.
And I see these two men get up walking towards the table and I'm thinking, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God." And another segue, Monday morning, I had to go to Great West Life and do a presentation to 130 executives for a huge deal with one of my sales reps.
Oh my
And I'm
God.
looking at the guy going, "Oh Jesus, I think he's the guy."
Oh,
Of course, it's you're panicking, right? He
yes.
looked a lot like the guy I was going to be presenting, and I thought, "Oh yeah, lovely." It was, which is good. That didn't happen. But the guy comes up to our table with a bottle of wine, and he said, "We got your card, and we think, it's someday you'll think this is funny." And I wrote a short story called "Someday You'll Think This Is Funny." And that's the short story that I wrote. And he gave me the wine and he gave me a big hug. And he said, "You're the same age as my daughter. I'm sorry I scared you. I'm sorry you had to see me in my underwear." And I said, "I'm sorry you had to see me in my underwear." And he goes, "I'm not." And it was just great, a really great conversation. But I said to Rick, "That's a great opening to a book. That is a
Yes.
great opening to a book. So I'm doing it, but I'm going to put a spin on it. She's not going to have anyone there to help her. And I was been waiting for her name, and I said to Rick, so the opening of the scene will be this. And he goes, you're not going there. I said, yep, I'm going to start it that way. It's funny, but it's not. And it's not
I
a
know.
murder, but it's alarming. And then I already have the rest of the book in my mind, those four elements that I need mapped out. And last night I was sitting here looking at your schedule for your thing, and all of a sudden it came to me, and I said, I know her name. I know her name, Rick. And he goes, how did you do that? I said, I don't know. I've been thinking about it a lot and just let my mind go, and it came to me. So I already have her name. And I just hope people don't think she's too much like Denny because weird stuff happens to her, right?
Uh-huh.
So went for a long segue there. Sorry.
I would follow you. You're such a great storyteller, though, Holly. I would just follow you anywhere
That's
down
funny.
any segue. It's just so I'm completely enraptured.
Well, you know what? In this story, just really quickly, I
Uh-huh.
remember telling my mom about it, and she said, "Quit telling people stuff like this happens to us." And I said, "Mom, it happens to you all the time. You had a semi in the middle of nowhere drive into the side of your house with a PCP guy, and then 3 months later, she phones me, and the little village she lives in is very tiny, and she never locks her door ever. And I'm always like, Mom, you could get killed or murdered." And she goes, "Well, it is what it is if that's how the good Lord wants me to go." And I'm thinking, okay, good logic, Anne. But she phoned me and she said, "Do you hear that helicopter?" And I go, "Yeah, what is that noise?" And she goes, "We were watching TV and we opened our blinds and a truck whipped out in front of our house. And I think they're filming a movie." Al doesn't think it's a movie though, because the truck pulled up front and there were two guys fighting and they threw a body out. And then the helicopter's now up there and the police are surrounding our place. And the guy came up to the door and said, because we were watching, we have to go to court as witnesses. And I don't want to go to court. Back up, Mom. Is the
Hold
body
on.
still in the street? And she goes, yeah, they have somebody here that they're trying to get the body, and I think it's a film, and I guess it's not a film. So there was a murder, like in the middle of nowhere in a village with 70 people.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's my mom, right? So she had, and stuff happens to me. I'll describe something happening to me and getting locked in elevators, whatever, all the stuff that happens. And my mom will say, "Why does stuff like that always happen to you, Holly?" And I go, "Well, it gives me lots of good material for writing."
Good material.
Yeah. Yeah.
Holly, we have a traditional last question
Mhm.
on the podcast, and it is when the sideways life of Denny Voss is made into a movie or series, what do you think the theme song could be?
Oh, that's interesting. I hope it's not the Toy Story thing. Like, I love that he sings it to calm himself down, but I just don't think that's the way they should go with it. I'm not sure which one it would be. Um, right now I'm really stuck on Chris Stapleton, and I
Mm-hmm.
love his voice. And he has a
Hmm.
song called "You Are the Joy of My Life,"
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
I love that song. And he's speaking, I believe, to his partner, but it has further elements when you consider, to me, it could be somebody with a rescue dog, like Denny with George. You
Yeah.
know, "You're the joy of
Yeah.
my life," or better yet, Nana Joe with Denny.
Yes.
What a surprise he was. And "You were the joy of my life." And he's bringing everybody so much joy that I think maybe that song would be a good one to consider. And
Yeah.
I've had people say, would you rather have it a series or a movie?
Hmm.
Ah, gosh, I could see it as a series, absolutely.
Hmm.
But I think a movie it would be wonderful to be done as a movie. It really would.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
very film, I think it's
Yes.
very film driven.
I think so
Definitely.
too. I could totally see it. I could totally see it and look forward
Yeah.
to it.
Yeah.
Holly Kennedy, thank you so much for joining today. Speaking of joy, it has been a joy talking to you. Really appreciate
Well,
you coming.
thanks so much. Thanks for having me, Kelly. I hijacked your whole show.
I love it. Thanks for joining us on Literary Prospects. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. We'll see you next time.